He actually stood up in front of our entire church congregation on a Sunday morning, gripping the wooden podium with one hand, while his heavily pregnant girlfriend stood right next to him. He pulled the microphone close to his mouth and announced to a room full of people I had known for years, "My wife Lauren is barren. God has completely closed her womb, but God has blessed Tiffany." I was sitting right there in the second wooden pew. I was holding my leather Bible in my lap, and I was wearing the expensive blue dress I had just bought to celebrate our upcoming anniversary. Our senior pastor was standing near the choir, completely frozen, unsure of what to even do or say. In the dead silence of the sanctuary, my mother-in-law stood up in the front row and started loudly clapping her hands. "My name is Lauren. I am 32 years old and I live in Austin, Texas. I have been married to Daniel for 7 years. For 4 agonizing years, we tried everything to have a baby. I suffered through 2 traumatic miscarriages. The first one happened at 9 weeks, and the second one made it to 13 weeks. I literally bled out on our cold bathroom floor tiles, while he sat behind me, held my shoulders, and whispered that God has a plan for us. But for the entire last year, he completely stopped holding me. He started leaving the house to go to the gym at 9 o'clock at night. He started telling me I was emotionally cold, that I was way too obsessed with getting pregnant, and that I made our home feel incredibly depressing to live in simply because I could not give him a child. What I absolutely did not know at the time was that he was already actively telling everyone else in our lives a completely different story. His mother had actually called my cell phone 2 weeks before that Sunday church service. "Lauren, honey," she said softly, "Daniel told us all about your medical diagnosis. I am so sorry you are barren. You really should just let him go so he can finally have a real family." I squeezed the phone and asked her what diagnosis she was talking about. I told her my fertility doctor explicitly told me I am highly fertile and that we only had miscarriages because my body produces low progesterone, which is completely treatable with standard medication. She let out a heavy sigh and said, "Daniel told them I could not have children at all. He claimed I knew I was barren long before I ever married him, and that I completely lied to trap him. He had methodically built an entire lie. He told his family, all of our mutual friends, and our entire small group at church that I was 100% permanently barren. He set the stage so perfectly that when Tiffany finally showed up pregnant, he would look like the ultimate victim. He wanted to be the good, patient Christian man who waited and suffered for years, and finally found a woman who could naturally give him a child. Tiffany is 26 years old, and she works the front desk at the gym he goes to. She was exactly 5 months pregnant on that Sunday morning. Everyone sitting in the church knew the baby was his because he kept his hand possessively resting on her lower back the entire time they stood at the front. After the service was dismissed, I did not scream or cause a massive scene. I just walked straight up to him in the crowded church lobby with dozens of people watching us, and I looked him in the eye. "So, I am barren now?" I asked him quietly. He did not even flinch or look ashamed. "Lauren, do not make a scene here," he muttered, looking around. "You always knew this day would eventually come. Tiffany is pregnant with my child, and I need to do the right thing before God and marry her. You should honestly be happy that I am being transparent with you." Tiffany rubbed her stomach, looked at me with this pathetic, fake sympathy and said, "She was so sorry, but she could just give him what I couldn't." I turned around and drove straight home. I packed all of his clothes into heavy trash bags and threw them in the garage. Then I did the one thing he absolutely never expected me to do. I drove straight to our fertility clinic on Burnett Road. It was the exact same medical clinic we had gone to together for 2 agonizing years. I walked into the office and asked Dr. Patel to print my full medical file so I could hand it over to my divorce lawyer. She looked across her desk at me, completely confused. "Lauren, your file is absolutely perfect," she said, scrolling through her monitor. "Your AMH levels are excellent. Your uterus is completely healthy. You are not barren at all. In fact, my blood work shows you were actually pregnant last month for about 4 weeks. It was a chemical pregnancy, so you probably didn't even realize it happened. But you can easily carry a baby to full term with simple progesterone supplements." I stared at her in shock, and asked why my husband would stand up and tell everyone I know that I am permanently barren. Dr. Patel went completely quiet. She typed something into her keyboard and took a deep breath. She told me she really shouldn't show me this because of medical privacy laws, but I was legally still listed as his emergency contact. She said my husband came into the clinic alone 3 years ago, completely without me. She slowly turned the heavy computer monitor around so I could see the screen. It was a formal semen analysis report. The patient name was Daniel Carter. The medical result clearly read azoospermia, 0 sperm count, 0% chance of natural conception. Right below the results was a typed note from the lead doctor. Patient states history of heavy chemotherapy for lymphoma at age 14. Patient states he has not disclosed this medical history to his wife. Patient declined all grief counseling and explicitly requested no further contact from this clinic. He had severe cancer when he was 14 years old, and he never told me a single word about it. The radiation and chemo completely sterilized him before he ever reached high school. He sat there and knew for 3 entire years that he was shooting blanks. He deliberately let me go through exhausting blood tests, painful hormone shots, and traumatic miscarriages. He watched me hate and blame my own failing body, while he knew for an absolute fact that he was the problem the entire time. A cold realization hit me right there in the doctor's office. If my husband has 0 sperm, how on earth was Tiffany pregnant? I immediately hired a local private investigator. It cost me $800 in cash, and it was the best money I have ever spent in my life. The investigator found out Tiffany was not 5 months pregnant. She was a full 7 months pregnant. She actually got pregnant by her deadbeat ex-boyfriend down in Houston. When he abandoned her, she met Daniel at the gym a month later. She saw his expensive truck, looked up the deed to his nice house, listened to him complain endlessly about his terrible barren wife, and she saw the perfect financial opportunity. Daniel actually thought he was finally going to be a father. He genuinely believed God had performed a miracle just for him. He had convinced himself that somehow his body had healed, completely ignoring the hard medical science that he was permanently sterile. He quickly planned to marry her in exactly 2 weeks. They organized a small, rushed backyard wedding at his mother's house in Round Rock. He proudly invited our entire church congregation, and he explicitly uninvited me. I put on a nice dress and I showed up anyway. He was standing by the gate wearing a sharp gray suit. Tiffany was wearing a tight white lace maternity dress, and his mother was sitting in the front row of folding chairs, actively crying happy tears. He saw me open the wooden fence gate, and his face immediately hardened. "Lauren, you are absolutely not welcome here," he snapped, walking over to block me. "This is my fresh start and my new beginning." I looked past him at the guest and told him I just brought him a wedding gift. I didn't come alone. I brought Dr. Patel. I brought my aggressive divorce lawyer. And I brought Tiffany's ex-boyfriend, Marcus, who had happily driven 3 hours up from Houston, clutching a certified DNA paternity test he had already taken. I did not yell or cause a physical fight. I simply held up the printed copy of Daniel's semen analysis. I read the medical results out loud, projecting my voice so his mother and every single person from our church could hear the truth. "Daniel has been 100% sterile since he was 14 years old," I announced to the silent yard. "He knew about it for 3 years. He deliberately let me think I was the one who was barren. He lied to all of you so he could leave me for a woman he stupidly thinks is pregnant with his miracle baby. But Tiffany is 7 months pregnant, not 5. This baby belongs to Marcus. Daniel can never, ever have children." Tiffany's face turned completely chalk white. She pointed at Marcus and started hysterically screaming that it was not true, that the paperwork was completely fake, and that he was lying to ruin her life. Marcus just shook his head and held up his own envelope. "Tiff, I took the genetic test," he said flatly. "It is 99.9% mine. You know it is. You literally texted me and told me you were going to get this rich guy to pay for everything and raise it for us." Daniel's mother stopped crying her happy tears. Her legs gave out and she just collapsed heavily onto the grass, staring in horror at her son. Daniel didn't fight back or scream. He just stared blankly at the medical paper in my hand. His fingers were violently shaking. "You weren't ever supposed to find out about the cancer," he whispered, completely broken. "I just wanted to be a real father. just once in my life. I stepped closer to him. You wanted to be a father so badly that you let me completely hate my own failing body for 4 straight years, I asked him, my voice finally cracking. You stood up and called me barren in front of God? I turned my head and looked at Tiffany, who was sobbing into her hands. And you, I said in disgust. You knew he wasn't the biological father. You were perfectly happy to let him raise a baby that isn't his, take over his house, and drain his money, all built on a massive lie. I walked over to the decorated catering table and left a small, wrapped gift box right next to the wedding cake. Inside the box were my signed divorce papers and a strict court order evicting him from the house, which was legally in my name only because my late father left it to me before Daniel and I ever got married. Exactly 2 weeks later, Daniel called my phone. Tiffany had packed her bags and left him the moment she realized he actually had no money, because I took my house back and locked him out. She took a bus right back to Houston. Lauren, I have absolutely no one left, he pleaded into the phone, crying. Can we please just sit down and talk? Daniel, you stood on a stage and told everyone I know that I was barren, I said coldly. I actually believed it for a year. I hated myself every time I looked in the mirror. Now everyone in our lives knows who is really barren, and it is definitely not me. Do not ever call this number again. I hung up the phone. I am 32 years old. I am absolutely not barren. I am completely free. And for the first time in 4 years, I am finally going to try and have a baby with someone who will actually tell me the truth.